Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Solid Waste Disposal Measurement Act workshop for state agencies. This is the first of two workshops. The second will be held on March 11, the same room at the same time. And it will also be webcast. Thank you for coming, and welcome to those of you that are joining us via the webcast. Okay. For those of you that are tuning into the webcast, as we go along, you may email questions to SIERRARM, standing for Sierra Room, at the CalEPA, CALEPA.ca.gov. So we have them when we get to the questions and answer session toward the later part of the workshop. It also should be posted on the webcast screen, the email address. A few safety and housekeeping details to go over. We have two exits, doors in case of an emergency. If you go out this door, you would go to your left. If you go out the back door, you go to your right and down the stairs. In the event of a fire alarm, we are required to evacuate this room immediately. Please take your valuables with you and do not use the elevators. While staff will endeavor to assist you to the nearest exit, you should also know that you may find an exit door by following the ceiling-mounted exit signs. Okay, evacuees will exit down the stairs and possibly to a relocation site across the street. If you cannot use the stairs, you will be directed to a protective vestibule inside a stairwell. Should we have to relocate out of the building, please obey all traffic signals and exercise caution crossing the street. Drinking fountains and restrooms are out the back door to your left, all the way to the end, and make another left, and they're on the right. Again, drinking fountains in the restrooms. We do encourage recycling efforts in this building. Containers are located in the aisles, in the hallways, as well as in each room. And I'm going to introduce to you Deborah Custard. Deborah is the lead for our team for state agencies, and she's going to do the presentation for you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all again for coming. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, this is not a very big room. So we're going to go over basically a lot of information today, and we found it works better if we hold questions to the end. So if you have questions, if you're listening in on the webcast, go ahead and email them as you think of them, and when we get to the question and answer session, we'll cover those. But if you're in the room here, jot them down and keep them in your mind, and then we'll go over them when we get to that point, okay? So what we'll cover today is, I'll give you the basic big concept of where we're at, is we're focusing on program implementation. That's the really big shift that SB 1016 made for state agencies and for local jurisdictions. The focus is on program implementation, okay? And then we'll run through how the new disposal measurement system works, because we haven't changed a lot of things, except for the big shift from measuring diversion to measuring disposal. So we'll go over how all those numbers work out and things like that. Okay. I want to give you a little bit of background on how we arrived at this point with having 1016 and how these changes came about. Okay. We'll give you some benefits, how we crunched all the numbers, what we actually do with those numbers once we get them, how we compare them, and what that means to you, and then how it affects our reporting and review cycles. Okay. So why did we change it? All right. A lot of it came from stakeholder workshops that we conducted primarily with jurisdictions, because the jurisdictions were really finding that their system was very, very inaccurate, untimely. They were waiting 18 to 24 months to get their numbers back. There was a lot of estimating and calculating done on both the part of local jurisdictions and state agencies. So overwhelmingly, what we heard back was that they wanted something that worked better. So SB 1016, through those stakeholder workshops, we got a lot of feedback. We pulled the information together and we presented it to our board in November of '05. And those comments and feedback formed the basis of SB 1016, which was carried by Senator Wiggins. Okay. And then in September of 2008, it was passed into law, signed by the governor, and it actually received no votes in going through the legislature, which is just really phenomenal. That doesn't happen very often. So it had a lot of support for making these changes. Okay. So that's kind of how we arrived here today. So what they asked for in switching to SB 1016 was to focus on programs rather than number counting and crunching and all of that. So that's a big shift that I had mentioned already. It maintains the 50% diversion mandate. That does not go away. We're still required to divert 50% of the waste that goes to landfill. That hasn't changed. But what we're doing is we're measuring that in terms of disposal instead of diversion, because measuring disposal is just so much easier than quantifying diversion. Okay? And that's what leads us to some increased accuracy for state agencies, is since we have a much better handle on what's being disposed than diverted, it will give us more solid numbers. Okay? And best of all, it eliminates your need to do an annual generation study. Okay? So again, and I may sound like a broken record saying program implementation, program implementation, program implementation, but I really want to make sure that that really, if you walk away with only one message from today, I want that to be it, that we're really focusing on programs versus the numbers. Yes, the numbers are still instructive to us, but they're not the end-all be-all, and we'll talk about that as we go along, but if I sound a little bit repetitive, that's why, is that's kind of the take-home message from today. Okay, disposal is one factor that we'll be considering in evaluating your progress. Okay, it no longer determines your compliance. Okay, so before it was either you made 50% diversion and you were found in compliance, or you didn't and you weren't. Okay, now we look at your disposal numbers, and again, I'll go over in a bit about how we calculate them and compare them, but we look at the disposal as one factor in telling us how you're doing. We also look at your program implementation as another means of that. And then we just take the big picture and do what makes sense, essentially. So we're looking at, are you adequately implementing your programs? Are you doing everything you possibly could be doing that makes sense in order to divert your waste? Okay. So now you could actually be diverting a little bit more, or excuse me, see, we're still changing over that. You could be disposing a little bit more and still just doing everything you can to divert it, given marking conditions and things like that, and still be found in compliance. Okay. Go ahead. So what we've got, some more of the benefits are it saves resources by not having to do the annual generation study every year. Okay? It allows you to spend more of your time and efforts on actually implementing those diversion programs that we've talked about. These are the programs that you've looked at, you've selected for your agency, and you get to put your time and resources into those. And it also allows us more time to be out in the field helping you do that. However, it does maintain the SWORD reporting database. That has not changed. It will look a little bit different, but largely similar. We're just making updates so that it can handle the data changes and different things that we'll be asking. But it will actually get simpler for you to fill out, not harder. Okay? We're not asking for any data in the new version of SWORD that we weren't already asking for before. Okay? And it creates a parallel system for state agencies and local jurisdictions. It makes it a little bit easier for us to do our job in that when we're out in a jurisdiction, out in a local government area, it's easier for us to have one big picture of what's going on in that area. What's going on at the local government level, the business level, at the state agency level. The numbers are just a little bit easier to factor in when they all kind of look the same. They're all on the same sort of basis of disposal. So here's how we actually calculate it. And don't get worried about the numbers and the equations you see up there. I'm going to walk through it so you all understand how it's factored. You don't need to do this. We will be calculating these numbers for you. It will be automated in the system. But I want to walk through it so you understand where those numbers are coming from. Okay? What we will do is we will take the agency specific, so the numbers for your specific agency only. Okay? We'll take the 2006 generation number. And the reason we're using 2006 is that's the last time each state agency got 100% full board compliance review. And we're taking the 2006 generation number in pounds, and that's a little bit different because in the past we've been doing things on tons, so we're switching to pounds. Okay, we'll take that generation in pounds, divide it by your number of employees, and then divide it by 365 days, and that will give us pounds per person per day, and that will become your new 50% equivalent disposal target. Okay, so there's your target. We will factor this once, calculate this once, and it won't be changing. Okay, it's something that we calculate just the one time. And in factoring the target, that's the only time we really use generation, because we know generation has its limitations. Okay, but we're working off the best available data that we can. So, but from here on out, we won't be needing to work with generation. Okay. Now, something that's really important to remember is that is your individual target. The target for this person is not the same for that person, for that person. A higher target is not better than a lower target or vice versa. They're individual case-by-case basis. So you can't compare them to each other. You can't compare it statewide. Everybody has their own numbers. Okay. So this is basically just a graphical representation of what I just walked you through. The reason we take, oh, can you back up one, Carrie? I'm sorry, I missed a little step there. When we take your 50%, we get your generation in pounds, divide it by employees, and divide it by 365 days. Skip this step. We actually then divide it by 2. And the reason we do that is to give you 50%, because we're assuming that everybody was exactly at 50% diversion. So if that was the case, then half of what you were generating would have been going to disposal, and the other half would have been going to diversion. So what we're trying to do is get an equivalent target to what exactly 50% disposal would have been. Okay, and then that's your target. If you were above that, great. If you were diverting more than that, that's still okay. That's great. If you were below it, obviously work to do, but it doesn't affect your target. Okay. Okay, go ahead. So this is a graphical representation of what I was talking about. Is on the left there, say it's 10 pounds per person per day is your 2006 generation. Half of that would have been your disposal, okay? And that's, again, in pounds per person per day, assuming that everybody was exactly at 50%. So the 5 pounds per person per day would be the target for that particular jurisdiction. Okay. Now, once you have the target, year to year, what we'll be doing is calculating your annual disposal rate. And this is a little simple, same thing, sort of same basic concept. And again, we'll be calculating this for you. You don't need to do all this math. It'll come through the system. Okay. We'll take your pounds disposed in that particular year, divide it by your number of employees, and divide it by 365 days in the year. And that will give us how many pounds per person per day your agency disposed in that given year. Okay. Now, we will do that based upon employees for every agency. Some agencies have already been providing us data on the number of, say, for a prison, they've been giving us the number of their inmates, or for a college, they've been giving us the number of students, parks, giving us the number of visitors, those sorts of things, giving us some kind of alternative information coming in. We will also calculate a target and an annual disposal rate based upon those indicators as well. Visitors, inmates, whatever. It doesn't replace your target based upon employees. It's just another piece of data that we can use to take into consideration when we're determining whether or not you're adequately implementing your programs. Okay. Now, if your agency hasn't already been providing us with that sort of an alternative number, an additional factor, you will have an opportunity to provide that to us. So if you're finding that, hey, you know, we think there's this piece of information that you should really have that we haven't been already submitting, then that's when you will contact your LAMD representative, Local Assistance and Market Development Division here at our Waste Board, and then we'll work with you one-on-one to add that in if we feel that it's an appropriate indicator for us to add into your There we go. Another way to present it graphically is that, remember our target, based upon the scenario before, was 5 pounds per person per day. So under this scenario, if it's all calculated out and you come in with your annual disposal at 2.5 pounds per day, you're well below your target. And being below in the new system is a good thing. Before, being below was not good, okay? Now it's a good thing. If you're below your target, that's probably an indicator that your programs are doing really well. Over on the right, you'll see if it's more than that, say it's 7.5, then you're above your target. And that's where we really need to start taking a look and seeing, well, why is that happening? Why is your annual disposal more than your target? Okay. But remember that being below your target doesn't necessarily mean you're 100% in compliance, and being above your target, or excuse me, being below your target doesn't mean you're 100% in compliance, okay? Being above your target doesn't necessarily mean you're out of compliance. It just means we need to take a closer look. Okay. So when we have those two numbers, what we do is we compare them. And as I was saying, you take a look and see whether or not it's above or below. Okay. Just with the target, you can't compare your annual rates side by side with other agencies or statewide. They're individual. And I know that's a bit of a change because, well, what's your diversion rate? Well, what's our diversion rate? They can't be compared. And you may have directors or executives that are going to ask you to do that. And our mantra has been, it's not about the numbers. It's about the programs. So just, you know, chant that along with us as you talk to your executives and your directors, because it is a fundamental shift. Okay. We will be looking at your disposal trends over time. Okay. So we'll be looking for, you know, what is affecting those? Why is it trending up or why is it trending down? How are your programs changing and how is that disposal trend changing, to see how they're related, see what sorts of changes or modifications may need to be made based upon that. Okay. Go ahead. So how does this actually affect reporting? Okay. Although the format of the report will change a little bit, again, we're not asking you for anything different. We'll be asking you for your number of employees, which you're already giving us. We'll be asking you for your disposal number, which you're already giving us. Okay. What we won't be asking you for is diversion numbers by program. So we no longer need you to break out how many pounds or how many tons you diverted for beverage container recycling or grass cycling or business waste reduction, things like that. What you'll be telling us is, yes, I ran that program. I ran a beverage container recycling program. We'll be asking you for some additional narrative to tell us about those programs, but we'll no longer be asking you for numbers associated with them. Okay. If you were a modified agency, we're submitting a modified report, nothing changes there. Okay, so that you just swim along with the same system you have been doing in the past with reporting. Okay, the annual report for 08 is due September 1st, which is a change that shifts back from April, so you've got some more time to pull your numbers together, assess your programs before you submit your report. Okay, and that's for the prior calendar year. And the tentative date that we'll have those reports available for everybody is July 1. Okay. Subsequent reports after this next one are on the exact same schedule. Nothing changes. Okay. So every year it'll be September 1 for the prior calendar year. Okay. So once we get the reports in, what we'll be looking for, okay, every single year in the past we have reviewed your reports for compliance with the mandates, the statutory mandates. This is changing, okay? And this is something that changed through a policy, not necessarily through legislation. This was a policy that the board adopted in November of 07, I believe, okay, that allowed us to do this, to make it easier for you folks and to make it easier for us. So it's win-win on everybody's situation. So what we're doing is every year we are still reviewing reports. Okay, you don't get off an annual review, but we're not doing an annual compliance review. What we'll be looking for each year is to make sure that your report is complete. Is it accurate? Does it make sense? And we'll also be looking at it from a technical assistance standpoint. Since our staff will be out at each agency every year visiting you, the annual reports are a really good indicator for us of kind of tracking your programs, how can we help you to improve your programs? Okay, and it's also a great indicator for you to do the same. Okay. In addition, okay, every other year, what we'll be doing is we'll be taking a closer look at select agencies to do a compliance review. Okay, and this will be based upon criteria from year to year that our board or our staff determines is necessary for each agency. Okay, and what we'll be looking at is not so much just why or just what has gone on. Has your trend gone up? Has it gone down? What programs? But in addition to that, we'll be looking at more of the whys behind that. Why is the trend going this way or that way? Why is maybe your disposal going up? What are the factors behind that? And that's where we get into the program analysis to determine whether or not you're meeting your statutory mandates. Are you doing everything you truly could be doing to divert that waste? Okay. Now, if we find that you're doing everything you possibly could be doing, but there are factors that are beyond your control that are keeping you from diverting more, then you could still be found in compliance even if you are above your disposal target. Your annual is above your disposal target. Okay. So again, it's all about the programs. Okay. And I know that's a big shift for folks. Now, if we find that you're not adequately implementing your programs, what will happen is we turn you over to our jurisdiction compliance and audit section. And I know it says jurisdiction, that's just a name, the state agencies are in there too, okay? So what we'll be doing is, so you know, right after the reports are due September 1, September 2nd, anybody that has not reported every year, okay, we will refer over to our jurisdiction and compliance audit section, and they will be taking forward to our board for consideration any agencies that haven't submitted their report each year. Okay, so in the past we've nagged you, we've reminded you, we've cajoled you. That's not going to keep happening. Okay, this is your reminder now. We will send reminders as the due date gets closer, but there's really no kind of de facto grace period. They need to be in on the due date or we're sending them forward. Okay, it's not in our section anymore. The assistance section is different from the compliance section. So once they're due, they're due. Okay, so that's every year. Every year we get a report from everybody, and for those that we don't, we'll be sending forward to our JCA section. Every other year when we do our compliance reviews, anybody that our local assistance and market development staff finds is not adequately implementing programs will then be turned over to our jurisdiction and compliance audit section to be taken forward to the board for consideration. Okay, so that's how kind of it moves forward once we make those determinations. Now JCA will also be doing random audits, okay, and we're still working out procedures on these, but what will be happening is they will take a select number of reports and pull them, no matter what your target is, no matter where you're at. They'll just be randomly doing audits to just kind of a checks and balances system to just ensure that our findings are consistent, that state agency reporting is consistent, things like that. Okay, so they will be doing random audits of those, and those can be sent forward to the board for compliance issues too, if it's found that they need that. So where do we go from here? What's next? Okay, well, we've got the training today. We'll have another one on March 11th, and it's the same thing. So you're welcome to come back if you feel like you need kind of another walkthrough, another run-through. We're happy to do that. But if you feel like you've got it from today, you don't need to come back, or maybe just listen in from your desk. We will have another workshop on June 24th here in our CalEPA headquarters. And you can find that on our events page. I don't think it's listed quite yet, but as the date gets closer, it will be. And that's to actually, once we have the report up and running, our technical staff is furiously building and modifying our reporting. Once it's up and built, then we will actually walk you through the report. And just a chance for you to, because it will look different, but again, it'll be similar and we're not asking for additional information, but we want to give you that opportunity to walk through it and see what it looks like before you have to actually go through and fill it out. Okay? We're making an extraordinary amount of changes, so if you see things on our websites that you go, hey, this still says that, and it should say this, we're probably aware of that. We're just, again, trying to catch up with all these changes, and we're getting there. So we appreciate your patience as we get those built. We are going to be formulating some frequently asked questions and getting those up. So as we find from these workshops and other questions that we get, people are consistently confused by, you know, this or that, then we'll put those up on our website as FAQs to help you out. And the PowerPoint presentation, I think that's up. It got up, posted up in the last couple of days. So we have this PowerPoint presentation posted up along with the notes that I'm using to make presentation today. So that if you need to take it and present it in your own agency, forward it on to your directors, things like that, to explain it to them, you can take this and you can download it and make modifications and present it as you need to. Okay. And then just check back on the state agency news and events page to find updates or other tools and resources as we develop them to help you out as we all kind of wade through this together. So with that, I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, and you probably have a ton of questions. So we want to make sure that we've got plenty of time where we'll take some questions from the audience, and we're also having people email questions in, so we'll do some alternating on that. Question? Oh, hold on. So the people on the webcast can hear. We've got a mic for you.
Oh.
There you go.
We have volunteers in state parks. We have part-time employees. We have retired annuitants. So in our people calculations, how are we going to accurately reflect that so we don't raise our target?
What you'll do with that is you've already been giving us a number of employees, so you'll pretty much just stay consistent with what you've been providing to us already. We will be asking you in a box on the new report, so who else included in that number anyway? You know, so we'll say, how did you calculate your number of employees? And you'll say, you know, we took full-time equivalents, and it's all our, you know, I know at our waste board we've got kind of regular employees, and then we've got some contract employees. So that's where you'll say, hey, we included our contract employees in with our full-time employees and things like that. So that's where you have a chance to explain it. And it's really just staying consistent with what you've already been doing works. So.
In our agency, we're at 87% right now. So you're going to make your calculation on 50%. Does that not penalize us for being good stewards already?
It does not. That just means you're above your target, and great. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're looking, again, it's an indicator, and if you're well above your target, that means it's an indicator you're doing great. So it's not a penalty sort of situation if you were well above it to begin with.
In our case, we get looked at a lot by the press, and they're going to look at the numbers across the board and say, hey, wait a minute, you're now in the red, where you were in the doing quite well at 87%, but our disposal rates may go up as attendance goes up. So we're still diverting more because our poundage of diversion goes up.
Right. And who are you with?
California State Fair.
State Fair. Okay. And you're giving us those numbers of your number of employees, and you're giving us your number of visitors. So
No, I'm not giving you the number of visitors. I'm giving you the number of full-time employees. I always have.
So in theory, okay, and everything's, you know, case by case, but in theory, as your number of attendees go up, your number of employees go up. If that's not the case, then maybe that's an instance where you should be giving us those numbers of visitors. Because as your attendance goes up, your disposal will go up. Now, your diversion may be going up similarly. So you're still diverting as much as you had been, but your disposal still is going up. And that's the beauty of this system, is it accounts for growth. So that's a very good scenario, and thank you for the nice example, where maybe we should be getting that additional factor of that indicator of visitors in your instance. So contact your land representative, and we'll work to get that in.
We have an email question.
Who's in the back? Yeah.
If we already fall under AB 75 compliance rules, does SB 1016 apply to us?
SB 1016 is the new and improved AB 75. What it did is it actually amended the AB 75 statute so that it made these modifications to AB 75. So it's not in either or, it's all rolled up, and these are changes that were made to the AB 75 requirements. Oh, sorry.
You
Speak right into the end.
Department of Health Services used to be one agency. It divided and split in 2007. Should I be using the 2006, which is as a one department still? It split into Department of Healthcare Services and Department of Public Health.
Right. So if we have instances where we have a new agency, an agency that's splintered into two, things like that, we'll be taking those on a case-by-case basis. And like we said, we'll be factoring those numbers for you. So it's not like you need to make those determinations. If you have questions when we factor your targets, then contact your land representative. But we'll take, that's one that we'll be taking on a case-by-case basis and doing what makes sense. We may be looking at your 07 data instead.
Question?
Would you define disposal and generation? I'm new to this. I work with Department of Justice, and I don't know what you're talking about when you say disposal, and I don't know what disposal target, and I don't know what you're talking about when you say generation.
You bet, no problem. Generation is everything that you generate, okay? It's anything you throw away, anything you recycle, anything you compost, anything that you create that you no longer want, okay? So it's not a product manufactured or something like that, but it's anything that you create that you no longer want at your agency. So that's generation. Generation is made up of two different numbers. Anything you throw away, okay, and then anything you divert from landfill through recycling, composting, or other means of other means. Could be through source reduction, being that you've changed your process so you no longer even create that waste to begin with. Okay, so those two numbers, when you add diversion and you add disposal together, that gives you generation. And the disposal target is based upon assuming that when we factor your target, we're assuming that everybody was throwing away half of what they generated. And that's how we come up with the disposal target. Does that help you out? You need the mic. Disposal is trash, correct?
Landfill.
Yeah, anything that goes to landfill.
Email.
We'll catch an email question and we'll get you next.
In running a college, how do the number of students affect disposal rate?
Well, theoretically, the more people you have, the more your disposal will go up, okay? But we're also assuming that you're implementing programs commensurate with the generation that you're getting. So the more students you have, hopefully you're still diverting the same amount of waste, okay? The same percentage, okay? So even though you have more students, yes, your total generation will go up, but hopefully your programs are still getting rid of the same amount to diversion. So people get very concerned that if I get more employees or if I get more students or things like that, then all of a sudden my disposal goes up and I don't look so good in comparison to my target anymore. But again, that's how we account for growth, because that's a factor in these numbers, is your number of employees, or that's why we get the alternative factor of number of students or number of visitors for parks or inmates for colleges. So hopefully that answered the question. If not, go ahead and send a follow-up email and we'll catch you back one-on-one afterward. There you go.
In the prison setting, we
Is
have,
that on? Sorry.
in a prison setting, we have lockdowns, we have fog lines. How would that affect us? When we
I'm not sure you're broadcasting there.
rely on inmates for work.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's fog line, they don't come out. When there's lockdowns, they don't come out. And our disposal goes straight to the landfill.
Okay. You know, that may be something we need to take on a case-by-case basis. And that's kind of the beauty of the whole thing, is it's not all about the numbers anymore. So if you can say, hey, we had this big lockdown, and for some reason it affected our disposal in this manner, that's something you can tell us. I know there was an agency, and I can't remember which one it was, that got affected by the big E. coli outbreak in the spinach fields a while back because they were, I think, a fair, and they were disposing of all their manure, and fairs create a lot of manure and bedding. And that's how they were disposing of it. But then the E. coli thing came out, and they said, hey, no more, the spinach fields are taking nothing now. And so all that had to go to landfill. And that was just an odd anomaly sort of situation. So we'll take those into consideration case by case. You just need to make sure you let us know that.
My name is Ernie Moises. I work for Park and Recreation. I was just wondering, I know the California Integrated Waste Management have a lot of work cleaning up in our parks, and a lot of them is going to be diverted. We're going to do our recycling. And I was wondering, I know that my my diversion will be high this year. So when the compliance come down over the following year, how come, your reading, your diversion this year was, it was high, pretty high, and then the following year was real low. So how can we, how are we going to report this thing? Because the 1 year is pretty high, and then the following year is low because of the cleanup that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. When we factor your target, if 2006 was a kind of a wacky year for you, when you see that number come out, you need to let us know and say, hey, I know one agency's already contacted us and said 2006 was just not a typical year for us. We won't recalculate. Okay, we'll still calculate based upon that year, but that's when we have the ability to put a note in our system for our staff's reference that says, hey, here's what was going on in that year. And that's where we'll also be looking at those disposal trends over time. And if we see, you have a certain amount of fluctuation from year to year, we'll consider that maybe more normal for your agency than it would be for other folks. And then year to year in your report, there's also a place where you'll be able to put that information in where you'll say, here's what happened this year, and here's how it affected our disposal. So we'll have an idea year to year of what's gone on, and our staff can take that into consideration. Because again, it's not all about the numbers. Okay, we'll look at the numbers as kind of indicators, but also as your programs. So if your programs are still as strong as ever and you're doing everything you can to address what some of those fluctuations are, then you're probably in good shape.
Email?
Yep.
What number needs to be reported in the annual report, and why was September chosen for the reporting date?
I honestly can't tell you why September was chosen. Actually, come to think about it, I probably can. I think what they're trying to do is standardize between the state agencies and the local jurisdictions, and the local jurisdiction reports are due August 1, so they're trying to keep it somewhat on the same calendar year. It really helps us out in our agency because then we can cycle our workloads. So when we do compliance reviews every other year for state agencies, on the off year, we're doing compliance reviews for jurisdictions. Okay, so it really allows us to manage that workload on our part. So that's probably where that September date came from. And then what number is reported in the annual report?
What number will be reported in the annual report?
Well, the big numbers that you'll be giving us in the annual report will be your disposal, your total disposal for the year, okay, and then the number of employees. Now, if you've also given us that additional factor of prisoners, visitors, students, things like that, that will be a number you'd provide as well. So hopefully that answers it. And again, anybody on the emails, if we're not really catching the essence of your question, send a follow-up and we'll catch with you one-on-one afterward. Okay, there, and then we'll take an email and go to this side. Yeah.
Hi. When you were talking about the definition of generated waste, is that on the website currently?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Definition of generation. Definition of generation on the website. Do we have?
Should be.
I'm sure we have one somewhere. So if you want, you can give us your email afterwards, and we'll make sure we follow up and point you to that.
Okay, and then a follow-up. You said something about July 1st. Something was going to be posted or a report was going to be generated.
I'm sorry. I don't even know where I'm looking. Sorry. There you go. Thanks. Oh, yes, that's when we will make the annual report, open it up, and make it available for you to start filling out. Okay.
And that's where the 2006 calculation will be posted?
You will submit your numbers in your report, and yes, then it'll show up in that once you plug those numbers in. It will be... Does it already show up in that?
No, because we would need a disposal.
Does it show up, though, when they pull it, though? The target?
It should.
We're still working on the system, so pardon our working it out. I believe that when you go into your 08 report, it will show you your target already. Okay, it won't show you your annual because you need to plug those numbers in for that year, but I believe it'll show you your target.
Okay, and one last question. When you were talking about generated, just waste or other items going out, when you have a construction project and you have dirt and concrete that a contractor is taking out for you, is that still also need to be in that number?
If
Or
it's
is that no-
generated at your facility, yeah. Yeah. So if you're diverting it, be it through a contractor or whatever, then yeah, you still factor that in.
Okay, thanks.
But again, we're just looking at disposal. So if they're taking it for disposal, then it counts as disposal. We're no longer tracking what goes to diversion. So if they're taking it and the concrete's going for road base or something like that, you don't need to track those numbers. It's just what gets thrown into a landfill. So even if it's somebody that you've contracted with to do work at your agency, that would still count as disposal if they're throwing it out. And, you know, I think we're getting enough questions on what's generation, what's diversion, things like that, that can somebody over here make a note that we just need to follow up and maybe get some links to that on our news and events page. That'd be great. Okay, here, and then.
Yes. Is your disposable waste includes like regular waste too, or hazardous waste too?
Yes.
Non-regular? No?
Solid waste, anything that would just go to a regular landfill. Yeah. Got here. And then do we still have email questions? Okay, so we'll take this one and then we'll go to maybe a couple of email.
You said that the reporting will start July 1st. I mean,
That is our target date. With all our changes, we're really furiously hoping.
Okay, and you also mentioned several of the subsequent trainings here, and June 24 is when you touch on those, the new reporting format.
Right. We're hoping in June to actually be able to maybe walk you through the actual report. You know, we'll pull a computer up and let you, you know, kind of walk through it.
Okay, so you are going to do that before the site is up.
Hopefully.
Because July 1st is when the site's going to be tentatively up.
Right.
And June 24th is when your training is going to be.
Right.
Okay. Just wanted to
I know
clear-
it's really close, and the reason
I was wondering why not the other way around. I mean, open the thing and then have your training, so at least we're able to play around with it and know what's in there, and any question that we might have will, you know, be discussed during the training.
we can do whatever everybody thinks meets their best need. We wanted to make sure people didn't feel intimidated going into the process, so it kind of looked familiar when they went in to fill it in for their own agency. But certainly, I mean, just by a show of hands, how many people would rather have it before? And how many people would rather have it after it's up and posted? Okay. Yeah. The question is, right now we have it scheduled to walk you through the actual report about a week or so before the report's actually available to you. And the question was, wouldn't it be better to walk through once the report is actually, and you can get into it at your own agency? So the question was, how many people would like to see it before versus after? So that was an either or. So sorry, I shouldn't ask either or questions. So before? Some and after? Okay, tell you what, we'll just add another date. We'll do both. Okay? We'll catch everybody. Okay, and then we'll take a couple emails. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Hank. I'm with State Parks.
Yeah.
With State Parks, do we include all the visitors that throughout the parks? Do we lump them as one, or we right now have, I think, 46 individual recycling coordinators that report their own?
So the question is, so for parks, I'm not sure your question got picked up. Betty, is the other mic working better than that one? Do we have one that's working better than the other? Okay. How you report has not changed at all. So if you've been, if you're a headquarters reporting for district offices or things like that, you continue to do that. If each of your districts or, you know, outlying field shops or whatever have been reporting for themselves in the past, you'll continue to do that. So who reports for whom has not changed at all.
Okay.
Does that address your question?
Right. Also, you were saying the diversion from contractors, and whatever is produced, let's say for parks, lawn clippings, sludge, fire pit ash, and whatnot. You're saying that's not an important thing to pick up as far, throughout the year for diversion?
No, I'm not saying that you no longer should divert that by any means. You still should be diverting everything you can. It's just not what we measure anymore.
So on the report, because you're saying that the report, the old AB 75 report, had all that stuff,
Yeah,
metal,
how much gas diversion, how much,
all that,
yeah.
grass and whatnot. So they're still reporting. They're still
Yes.
plugging in those numbers.
No. You will say yes instead of 2 tons. Okay. You'll say we are diverting this. We do have programs to address this, this, and this, and this. Okay. We no longer need to see the numbers associated with each individual type of diversion. What we want to say is, bottom line, when we passed, the local jurisdiction diversion mandates and the state agency diversion mandates, the bottom line is we wanted to send less stuff to the landfill. So we
Right.
finally got around to just measuring what we all cared about to begin with.
Well, for parks, it made it easy for us to include that information on the contract when a contractor came in and said, yeah, this has to be diverted
You can
and
still do
whatnot.
that. Yes, absolutely still do that. And if you want to track those numbers, there's nothing to preclude you from doing that. We just will no longer ask you to report that.
Okay, what about e-waste?
E-waste is not something that can go into the landfill. Okay.
But it generates
Right.
a lot. And
Yeah. And actually, here's a plug for another thing. We'll be doing, I think it's in May, we're just basically getting it formulated, doing some training on e-waste for state agencies in specific. But it's not something that's allowed to go into the landfill, so it shouldn't be showing up in your disposal. So we're only tracking now what you're actually throwing away in the landfill.
Are you still going to be tracking e-waste disposal? Because I think out in the report there is, it's not part of our report, but it's still a tracked.
Yeah, and we probably will continue to track it in some manner. Whether or not I don't think we're going to be asking for actual diversion tonnages associated with it any longer. And we can follow up some if you want to make sure that you're getting the numbers you need. Let's do a few emails and then we'll.
Okay. Would you define modified and the reporting requirements under 1016?
And I always have to look up modifieds. Do you know offhand what it is? I always have to look.
200 or less employees and 100 tons of disposal, waste.
Okay. So if you have less than 200 employees or less than 100 tons of disposal, you are a modified agency and you can choose to submit an abbreviated report. However, under SB 1016, the report that everybody submits looks a lot like the ones that the modifieds have already been submitting. They haven't been giving us diversion tonnages, and now everybody else won't have to either. Okay, but if you are a modified agency, you already know it probably, and so that hasn't changed. And the second half of the question?
The reporting requirements, you answered it.
Oh, okay.
Nothing's changed.
So, but modified still do need to report every year. Okay.
Hi, my name is Les, and I'm a recycle coordinator for 2 departments at the Bateson building. We share a cafeteria. Now, what I'm hearing you say is we want to reduce our disposal in half, while I already do a great job diversion. For example, in our disposal, in our waste management bins, let's say half of it is stuff generated from the cafeteria, something I don't have control of, that I can't make them compost or something, which would be a great way to reduce disposal. So it's kind of like I'm fighting something I can't cut in half that's already existing.
Yeah, and we're not asking you to cut in half from where you are today. Okay? The diversion requirement of diverting 50% of what goes to landfill has not changed. Okay, so your requirement hasn't changed. We're just changing how we actually measure that. So if you've already, I have no idea what your diversion rate was, but let's say it was at 80%, okay? We're not asking you to cut in half the 20% that you're still throwing away. We're not asking you to do that. What we're doing is asking you to still maintain at least 50% diversion, okay? Which means 50% disposal. And you've already been challenged by trying to figure out how much of this waste is our waste, how much of this waste is their waste. I don't have any control over half of these things. That's a challenge that a lot of agencies have already had, especially since so many of us are in shared buildings. And, you know, CalEPA, we're kind of lucky because different departments, but all a pretty environmental mission. It's been a little bit easier for us, but we still have our challenges. If you're lumped in with some other agency or, you know, non-state entity, that challenge is a little tougher. But it's a challenge we've always had. And SB 1016 doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but it didn't make it any harder either. So does that address your question? Mostly? Not really? Yeah, I mean, pretty much. It doesn't, SB 1016 is not asking you in any way, shape, or form to change your program implementation. That all stays the same. Okay?
Deborah, we have an email.
Okay, email question.
We are a fairground with multiple events every weekend and satellite wagering 5 days a week. Are we going to now give you a total of all people who use our facility in a 1 year period?
You will give us the number of employees that you have, okay, which you've already been reporting to us. So that number does not change. What you've already been submitting, we will continue to get. If you are giving us an alternate number of, say, number of visitors or things like that, that you've already been giving us, you'll continue to give us that. If you haven't been giving us that number and you feel that it's something that would be instructive for our staff to know so that we have an additional factor to consider when we're looking at your target and your annual rate, then that's something that they can work on with their land representative to get that included. Okay. And then, do you have a mic? Okay. Over here, and then we'll have a question back there. Yep.
Am I correct in assuming that business source reduction will still be a number used in the new report?
It won't be a number. It'll be a check in a box. So we'll say, are you doing business source reduction? And in the past, the way you told us yes was to put the number of tons that you've diverted through that activity. Now you'll just say, yep, we've been doing that. And we'll be asking for some additional narrative to tell us about your programs. But that's where it gets a little bit easier, and we can. Tons are great, but they're not always instructive. Why that much? And that's where we were kind of lacking before. Now we'll have a little bit more information to tell us what's really going on with that diversion program and how it's all manifested of how well all your diversion programs are doing is that bottom line, how much are you still throwing away in the trash?
Thank you.
Okay, and then a question in the red.
My name is Jim Greco. I'm an independent consultant. I work primarily with jurisdictions. And my question pertains to, it's my understanding that with jurisdictions, cities, towns, and counties, that their disposal that's reported comes from the disposal reporting system.
Right.
Am I correct that with state agencies, it's really what the agency keeps track of as far as disposal? It's not the DRS?
Correct. Yeah, we don't have a coordinated disposal tracking system like we do for jurisdictions, because the jurisdictions, the way they track it through the disposal reporting system is through what actually goes through the gates at landfills and whatnot. And what agencies throw away is commingled in that waste. Because everything that goes across the scale at a landfill, it doesn't differentiate who generated it within that jurisdiction. So it is agency tracked disposal for state agencies.
Yeah, I don't really have a question other than just clarification. I'm Kent from Department of Mental Health. It sounds like to me that what you're telling us is that we're going to report the amount of people, which you said, our diversion amount, and then the other real
your
key,
disposal amount.
Our disposal amount, excuse me. And our other real key factor is any outstanding programs that we may have done that year that would affect our overall disposal weights, because that's going to be the key for you guys to key in on what's happening, and it's making a spike. The other thing I see is a real key to every agency here, and nobody's speaking to this, but our workload doesn't change. It's still critical for each of us to keep our records on diversion and all that, because you guys are going to be monitoring this. If you come out to say, why have your weight spiked, it's in our best interest to show what we're doing and how we're tracking it and what we're diverting, so you have an idea what our programs are about. So we can't just blow off, well, I'm not going to track diversion because I don't have to anymore, I'll just mark yes. I mean, you have to track that stuff so that to quantify what we're doing. So if you come out and you say, why are all of a sudden you spiked, we'll have the information to show you what took place and what we're doing about it.
And that's really up agency to agency to determine exactly what data they need to handle in-house. But that is a good point. You know, your workload is not changing. If anything, we're making it a little bit easier for you to put the focus onto program implementation instead of tracking all these numbers in the manner that we happen to need them. It's up to each agency to determine if they still have a need for that data internally, but that's just not something that we'll be asking for on a program-by-program basis. Do we have an email question? We're good on emails. Okay. Betty, in the front? Oh, in the back and then the front? Okay. Thanks.
You mentioned that the jurisdiction compliance and audits, and then you said that there would be some consequences if you didn't report. What are those consequences going to be?
And basically none of that has changed. What we do, stop it. What we do is we take people, the jurisdiction compliance audit section is what we did a while back when our board reorganized, is we did this for jurisdictions and state agencies. We took the compliance section away from the assistance section. So now they're two independent work units. And what happens once we find that a state agency is not implementing their programs, is not in compliance, has not changed. What they do is they take an agenda item before the board, and then the board determines what action needs to be taken from there on out. Okay. Yeah, right here in the front. But that's the same system we've been operating under already. That hasn't changed.
Now, I just want to get this right in my mind.
Sure.
The number is the amount generated that you're going to divide in half.
Correct.
So if I've
for
been...
For setting the target.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I have been at 87%, my actual number, my target number, is going to be higher than I actually send to the landfill now.
Yes.
So I'm in good shape.
Yep. And that's why, even though we're factoring it on, assuming everybody's at 50%, it still takes into consideration that you've been implementing great programs and doing a good job. That still shows up. Yeah. So not necessarily in your target in and of itself, but it's when we compare it to your actual that comes out. And that's, again, why we can't compare target to target amongst agencies. They're not comparable at all. So, and if you ask us to, we'll go, sorry. Yeah.
Hi, I'm from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Yountville Veterans Home, and I understand that the SB 1016 is mostly for reporting purposes, but I'm wondering if there is going to be any assistance or help for the actual companies that do the diversion for us, because I'm finding for myself that we're being asked to, keep building our numbers, but yet I'm having a harder time to find places to divert my landfill waste to, for like paper contractors, cardboard, things of that nature, because the plants no longer want it, and it's costing money to get someone up to us. And
right. And we recognize that that's an issue not just for state agencies, but for local jurisdictions and businesses, and everybody's struggling with the economy and the markets struggling as well. And that's something we're looking at in a larger basis throughout our board, is to examine, what are the conditions and what can we do to facilitate, making them better. And there's only so much we have control over, and we recognize there's only so much you have control over. And that's something that we will be taking into consideration when we look at what are you doing to throw less away? Are you maximizing everything you can do? And then when there's circumstances that are outside your control, we'll recognize that. And that's where it was great when we reorganized, in that we now have one representative assigned to each jurisdictional area. So for, say Sacramento, well, Sacramento's a bad example because we have so many agencies, but so for Kern, there's one person that's in charge of that area. They deal with the state agencies, they deal with the businesses, they deal with the local jurisdictions. So we have one person that kind of has their finger on the pulse of what's going on, what is truly kind of divertible in that area, what are the markets, what are the factors affecting those sorts of things. And they're better able to assist you in finding some of those solutions to some of those challenges. And with us not spending so much time on reporting, it's enabling us to spend more time out in the field providing exactly that kind of assistance. Are we still okay on emails? Have you been refreshing? Okay. Anything else from any other questions?
We have a question.
Okay.
My name's Paulette Gonzalez, and I'm with the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. Piggybacking on what Les was asking in regards to if you have offices that are co-located in a DGS building, as an agency, are you still required to report those numbers within your total employee head count, or is that DGS building going to be reporting those numbers?
No, you're still going to be reporting for the same set of people that you've been reporting for before. None of that changes. So if you're in a commingled building, whoever you've been including in your figures before will be the same people you're including in your figures from here on out. That won't change.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Betty?
So if an agency wants to keep numbers of recycling and composting or whatever for educational purposes to show how much energy or water or materials or trees, whatever they saved, they need to keep that information themselves, right?
Right. It'll no longer be something that we track through our SORD report.
Okay.
Anybody else? Oh. Hold on one second. You need a mic so that the people webcasting can hear you.
As far as if you have a large campus with trimmings and taking trees down and such, is that all considered part of diversion if you grind that stuff up and everything and it doesn't go in a landfill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, right next to you, Betty.
I have a concern. The Eastern Complex, it's 4 big buildings. It's primarily DHCS and public health combined housed in there, but the building is managed by DGS. Now, in the past year, what I've been doing is they're the ones collecting the reports for the trash, and they're getting because they're managing the building.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if it's going in their name, are they reporting that as their own?
Yeah.
I can answer that one. Once again, I'm with Parks. I'm at headquarters at the Resources Building, and we're up, one again, a multi-agency building. And what we do is we find out what our percentage of occupancy are in the building. For Parks, it's 19%. So I go to the building manager. We get the yearly total of waste, and I take that figure, 19%. That's what I build my reports on.
Yeah, and that's one means of doing it. If you can't really, truly determine what bin is yours and how much it weighs and how much.
There's actually no DGS people there. They're just their maintenance people that are working in there. It's
right.
Primarily our staff, the HCS and public health.
So they're tracking the numbers and giving them to you, or
they don't give it to me if I don't ask. My concern is when the trash is being picked up, it's under their name.
Mm-hmm.
It's not under our name. It's not showing under our name. So when they're reporting this, do they report it as theirs? I mean,
no. It's trash
hopefully.
that would be allocated to your agencies. And however that happened for last year, because last year you provided us with a disposal number. And because
every year I've been providing disposal numbers,
right.
but
And so that
what it is it's coming from them.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that they're reporting it also as theirs.
Oh, so like a double counting sort of thing? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's something I think that we need to follow up on case-by-case basis and get with our contact.
Trevor says no.
No? What are you saying, Trevor? You want to follow up? We'll follow up case by case on that. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, there we go. In the middle.
You know the DGS, the report we get from the building manager, when they're not recycling or when they're not diverting, what do we do? In their own report, they're not doing enough of the recycling.
That's where you need to work with them to, and everybody has that struggle. There's a lot of people or a lot of agencies, especially if they're not in their own building, and they say, well, my building management doesn't want to work with me, and I can't get them to do this and do that. That's where, to the best extent we can, we'll help you to facilitate that. So if you're having particular struggles or something they're, specifically resistant to, maybe we can help you find some solutions to that, troubleshoot through some of those things, and that's how you would contact your land representative assigned to your agency. So we could try to work with you in that regard to see, what we can do to help facilitate some of that.
Assigned to the agency or assigned to the district? Because DOJ we have a very big problem because a lot of our buildings are leased, and they're leased from private companies. And so, say San Diego, I know San Diego, for instance, has a very, very big problem. They cannot get numbers from their building manager.
And each of your districts reports under just the one parent report?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it rolls all up. They all report separately to me, and then it rolls up. But I still need those separate numbers from all of those different sites.
Right. So we just get one report from DOJ?
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's where you could let us know, and then we can facilitate getting you in contact with the people in those particular regions. If it's, San Diego's doing great, but, Fullerton's not or something, then we can hook you up with the people in that actual area. Yeah. Our staff left hand will talk to the right hand, and we'll get you. But we also want to do, and the reason we want to do it that way is we want to make sure that it's going up through your agency so that you're aware, because you're submitting the reports, of where there's issues and where there's not, so that our staff that have those different areas can work together, and then the same on your end. So, others? No? Well, I really appreciate you all coming, and if you find follow-up questions, email them to your LAMD contact, and we'd be happy to address them for you. And questions may come up. Feel free to email them up at our next session if you want to. If you think of it during that session, feel free. And like I said, we're here to help you out. So, we appreciate your coming, and it won't be scary, truly. Thanks.
Thanks for coming.